You ever get that eerie feeling? Like that sudden jolt of, wait a minute, haven't I been here before?
Hmm.
Even when you just know it's a brand new experience.
Yeah, that's déjà vu. And it's really, really common.
How common are we talking?
Well, estimates usually put it somewhere around 60, maybe 70% of people experiencing it at least once.
Wow. Okay, so most of us have had that weird glitchy moment.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating, I think, is that even though it's so widespread, it's still pretty mysterious.
Right. It feels like more than just, I don't know, a brain fart.
Definitely. It touches on memory, perception, even sort of bigger philosophical questions about, well, reality itself.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today. We're doing a deep dive into déjà vu.
Uh-huh.
We've got this document, new DOC document.pdf that we've been digging through, and our mission really is to unpack it all for you.
Yeah, to give you a good sense of what it is, what the science says, some of the other ideas.
Without making your head spin, hopefully. Just the really interesting bits.
Okay, so where do we start? Maybe with the fact that déjà vu isn't just one thing.
Oh, there are different flavors of déjà vu.
Kinda, yeah. Researchers have actually identified a few distinct types, variations on that main theme of familiarity.
All right, lay 'em on me. What have we got?
Well, the most common one, the one most people probably mean when they say déjà vu, is technically déjà vu itself, meaning, already seen.
Okay, the classic, I've seen this before feeling.
Right, just a general sense of familiarity with something new. But then there's
Approximate.
déjà vécu,
The cube, yeah.
already lived through, and this one is, like, way more intense.
How so?
It's not just seen it, it's, I have actually lived this exact moment. Sometimes people even feel they know what's about to happen next.
Whoa. Okay, that sounds, yeah, like a serious head trip, like you're watching a rerun of your own life, but it's the first showing.
It can feel really vivid, apparently. Then, much rarer, is déjà visité.
Already visited. Like a place?
Exactly. That weird feeling of knowing your way around a place you've absolutely never been to before.
Okay, that's bizarre. Like your brain's got some hidden GPS data.
Sort of. And there's also déjà senti, already felt.
An emotion.
Yeah, or even just a thought. It's more fleeting. Just a sense of, I've felt this specific feeling before, but without a concrete memory attached.
Huh. More subtle.
Very subtle. And just to cover the bases, we should probably mention the opposite, too.
There's an opposite.
Yeah, jamais vu. Never seen.
So, feeling like something familiar is totally new.
Precisely. Like looking at a familiar face or a word you use all the time, and suddenly it feels completely alien and unfamiliar.
Man, our brains are weird. So it works both ways. False familiarity and false unfamiliarity.
They keep us on our toes, don't they? And, people have been trying to figure this stuff out for ages. It's not a new obsession.
Right. So before brain scans and all that tech, what were people thinking? Any historical theories?
Oh, definitely. If you go way, way back, you find thinkers like Plato.
Plato, what did he think?
He actually wondered if déjà vu could be like echoes of memories from a past life, reincarnation popping up early.
Huh. So that feeling I had about that weird old chair in the antique shop. Maybe I was a Victorian gentleman who loved that chair.
Uh-huh. Maybe. That's one line of thought. A bit later, you get ideas like the collective unconscious from people like Pythagoras and much later, Carl Jung.
Collective unconscious, like a shared pool of human memory.
Kind of, yeah. Like this inherited reservoir of experiences and symbols that we all tap into. Déjà vu, in that view, might be a brief connection to those deep ancestral memories.
Okay, so less my past life, more like plugging into the human story. Interesting.
Then, fast forward to the 19th century, things get a bit more formal. A French researcher, Émile Boirac, he's the one who actually coined the term déjà vu back in 1876.
Ah, so he named it.
He did. And around then, others like Arthur Allen proposed more, let's say, down-to-earth ideas. Allen thought maybe it was linked to fatigue.
Fatigue, like being tired makes your brain glitch.
Sort of. Like maybe fatigue causes a tiny lapse in attention. You process something, zone out for a millisecond, then process it again.
Yeah.
And it feels familiar because, well, you did just process it.
Okay, I can kind of see that, like a mental stutter.
A good way to put it. And then, of course, you have Freud.
Gotta be Freud in there somewhere. What was his take?
He linked it to repressed memories or unconscious wishes bubbling up. That feeling of familiarity might be your subconscious recognizing a link to some, hidden desire or a forgotten experience.
So maybe that déjà vu I had walking into that bakery wasn't a past life baker, but my repressed desire for a giant croissant.
That might be the Freudian angle, yes.
Yeah.
But let's jump into the more modern stuff, the neuroscience.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk brains. What's actually going on in our heads during déjà vu?
Well, one of the leading ideas is the dual processing theory.
Dual processing, like two things happening at once.
Exactly. The idea is that information usually flows, sensory input, short-term memory, then long-term storage.
Right.
This theory suggests, maybe sometimes, that sensory info takes a slight detour. One signal goes the normal route, but another might bypass short-term memory and hit long-term memory almost directly.
Ah, like a shortcut.
Kind of. So you get this feeling of retrieval, like you're accessing an old memory, but the logging it part in short-term memory hasn't fully caught up. It creates that weird dissonance.
So the filing system gets out of whack for a second. Information ends up in the already stored cabinet before it's been stamped received.
That's a great analogy. It could be our brain's error-checking system kind of flagging a timing mismatch. Then there's a really significant link with temporal lobe epilepsy, or TLE.
Epilepsy, how does that connect?
Well, it turns out that déjà vu is a really common symptom for people with TLE. It often happens right before a seizure, like an aura.
Wow, okay. So what does that tell us?
Researchers think it points to specific brain areas, the hippocampus and the rhinal cortex. They're crucial for forming new memories and recognizing familiarity. In TLE, there might be brief, abnormal bursts of electrical activity, like little misfires in those areas. And that misfiring could be enough to trigger that false sense of familiarity.
So for some people, frequent déjà vu could actually be a neurological sign.
It could be, yeah. Especially if it's happening a lot or with other symptoms. It's definitely worth mentioning to a doctor in those cases. But for most people having it occasionally, it's probably not that.
Okay. Are there other brain theories?
There are. A guy named Dr. Herman Snow came up with a hologram theory.
Holograms.
In our brains.
Sort of the idea that memories aren't stored like single files, but more like holograms, where any small part contains the whole picture.
Okay.
So a tiny fragment of your current experience, a smell, a sound, a shape, might be enough to trigger the recognition of a whole past scene, even if that scene isn't a real memory.
Like one puzzle piece making you feel like you've seen the whole jigsaw before? That's pretty cool.
It is. And one more neurological idea is neurotransmission delay.
A delay. Yeah, the idea that maybe one side of your brain processes information just a tiny fraction of a second slower than the other side.
Like an echo.
Exactly. That slightly delayed signal feels like you're experiencing it again.
Okay, so lots of potential brain glitches, timing errors, weird routing. What about the psychological side? Less about the wiring, more about the mind.
Absolutely. A big one psychologically is the memory mismatch theory.
Mismatch.
Yeah, your brain is constantly trying to match what you're seeing now with stuff you already know, your existing memories. Sometimes the theory goes, it makes a mistake, it finds a partial match, or incorrectly links the new experience to an old one, and boom, false familiarity.
Like seeing a stranger who just really reminds you of your cousin, but you know it's not them. That kind of fuzzy match.
Something like that, yeah. Then there's an attention-based explanation.
Okay. Attention. How does that work?
This one suggests it happens when your attention dips for just a moment. Maybe you glance away, or your mind wanders for a split second while you're taking in a scene.
Right.
When you refocus, your brain reprocesses the information that was just there. But because of that tiny attention break, it feels like you're processing it for the first time again.
Oh, I can totally see that. Like when you're half listening, tune back in, and it feels like they just repeated themselves, but they didn't.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And one more psychological angle is the dream incorporation theory.
Dreams. How do they fit in?
This idea proposes that maybe some déjà vu feelings aren't about past waking experiences, but about things you experienced in a forgotten dream.
Huh.
Like you had a dream with elements similar to your current situation, the place, the feeling, whatever. You don't consciously remember the dream, but when you encounter those elements while awake, it triggers that vague sense of familiarity.
You know, that almost makes a weird kind of sense. That time I had intense déjà vu in that weird cafe. Maybe I dreamt about weird cafes the night before.
It's definitely a possibility psychologists consider.
Oh.
Now, moving slightly away from the purely scientific, déjà vu pops up in parapsychological or spiritual contexts too.
Okay, let's touch on this briefly. Not endorsing, just acknowledging they're out there.
Right. So within beliefs about reincarnation, déjà vu is often seen pretty straightforwardly as a flicker of a past life memory.
Back to my Victorian gentleman self.
Or your locksmith self, yes. And then you get ideas branching off some interpretations of quantum physics, like the parallel universes idea.
Whoa. Okay. How does that connect?
The suggestion there, and it's very speculative, is that déjà vu might be a brief bleed through or overlap with an alternate reality where you did actually live that moment.
Okay, now my brain is starting to feel looped. That's wild stuff.
It is pretty out there. And finally, some people connect it to things like precognition or psychic stuff, feeling it's a glimpse of the future you somehow already know.
Right. It's amazing how this one feeling sparked so many different explanations, from brain wiring to other dimensions.
It really speaks to how much we want to understand these unusual experiences. And, it's seeped into our culture because of that.
Yeah. Pop culture loves déjà vu, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, The Matrix is the classic example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Déjà vu is literally a sign the system's been changed.
A glitch in the Matrix. Yep.
And then there's the Denzel Washington movie, actually called Déjà Vu, using it for time-bending investigation.
I remember that one. They really ran with the concept.
Yeah, and you see it in books, too, like David Copperfield. Dickens describes the feeling.
Yeah.
And music, Beyonce, Eminem, they both have tracks called Déjà Vu. It clearly resonates.
It's a universal hook. Now, you mentioned some case studies earlier. Can we look at some real-world examples?
Sure. Historically, Mark Twain wrote quite vividly about having a very strong déjà vu experience, really emphasizing how real it felt.
Mark Twain, huh? Interesting.
And there are even suggestions, though harder to verify, that someone like Nostradamus might have used feelings like déjà vu in his process for prophecies.
Wow, connecting it to prophecy, that's a leap.
It is. On the more scientific side, you have researchers like Dr. Akira O'Connor using fMRI brain scans on healthy people while they experience déjà vu, trying to map exactly what lights up.
Trying to catch the brain in the act.
Exactly. And Dr. Chris Moulin studied a fascinating, though sad, case of a man with chronic déjà vu. It was so persistent, he felt like he was constantly reliving moments, essentially trapped in time.
Oh, that sounds awful. Just constantly feeling like everything's a repeat.
Terribly disorienting.
Mm-hmm.
So these studies and others, what have they actually shown us?
Yeah, what are the key findings from the science side?
Well, those virtual reality experiments at MIT were pretty neat.
Yeah.
They could actually induce déjà vu in people by subtly changing things in the VR world.
Oh.
Like showing them a scene, then showing it again with very minor differences. It suggests our brains are sensitive to these slight mismatches, and that can trigger the feeling.
So tiny discrepancies can fool the familiarity meter.
Seems so. And way back in the 50s, Wilder Penfield's work was crucial. He electrically stimulated parts of the temporal lobes of awake brain surgery patients.
Whoa!
And they reported experiencing déjà vu sensations. Direct link between stimulating that brain region and triggering the feeling.
That's pretty direct evidence. And the stats we mentioned earlier, about 60–70% of people.
Yep, that figure holds up pretty consistently in surveys. And it does seem most common when people are younger, say ages 15 to 25.
Any idea why younger people?
Not definitively. Maybe something to do with brain development is still happening, or how memory systems consolidate and change as we age. It tends to decrease as people get older.
Interesting. Okay, so before we wrap up, let's just quickly clarify déjà vu versus some other vu words.
Good idea, because they sound similar but are different beasts.
Right, so we mentioned jamais vu already.
Yeah, the opposite familiar feels suddenly unfamiliar.
Okay, then what about presque vu?
Presque vu, almost seen. That's the classic tip of the tongue feeling. You know something, you're right there, but you just can't quite retrieve it.
Gotcha. Frustrating, but different from déjà vu's familiarity.
Right. And then there's Capgras delusion, which is much more serious.
What's that?
That's a psychiatric condition where someone becomes convinced that familiar people, like spouse, parents, friends, have been replaced by identical-looking imposters.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that's very different territory. A delusion about identity, not just familiarity.
Exactly. It involves a profound breakdown in recognition and emotional connection, not just that fleeting déjà vu feeling.
So, important distinctions. Now, a big question people probably have. Should you worry if you experience déjà vu? Is it a sign of, like, a mental disorder?
Generally, no. For most people, having déjà vu now and then is totally normal, just one of those weird things brains do.
Cute. Okay.
But, as we said with the TLE connection, if it starts happening really frequently, is very intense, or it comes with other odd symptoms like confusion, disorientation, or brief blackouts, then yes, it's worth getting checked out by a doctor.
Okay, so context and frequency matter. Good to know. And the other question, can you make it happen? Can déjà vu be induced?
Yeah, interestingly, it seems you can. Research suggests it can be triggered sometimes through hypnosis.
Hypnosis.
And like those VR experiments showed, manipulating sensory input can do it. And Penfield's brain stimulation studies directly induced it too. So yes, it can be artificially triggered under certain conditions.
Wild. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. If you had to boil it down, what's the main takeaway message for someone listening?
I think the key thing is that déjà vu is super common, happens to most of us, but it's still not fully understood. There are solid neurological theories about brain processing glitches.
Right, the dual processing, the temporal lobe stuff.
Exactly, and good psychological theories about memory mismatches or attention lapses.
Dream theory, too.
Yeah, and then there are the more out-there interpretations, too. So it's this familiar feeling that sits at the crossroads of brain science, psychology, and even philosophy.
A common glitch with uncommon depth, maybe? And that 60-70% figure really sticks with you? It's not some rare anomaly.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And maybe the final thought to leave people with is this. Even if déjà vu is just a brain trick, a momentary lapse in our perception or memory systems, doesn't that itself tell us something fascinating? It highlights just how complex and maybe how fragile our conscious experience of reality actually is. Our brain builds this world for us second by second. And sometimes there's a little flicker in the construction.
That's a great way to put it. A flicker that reminds us our perception isn't always a perfect recording. It makes you think about your own moments of déjà vu differently, doesn't it? What was my brain doing right then?
Exactly. And who knows, with better brain imaging, maybe AI helping analyze patterns, we might get even closer to figuring out those flickers in the future.
Something to look forward to. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thanks for diving into all that complex stuff with me.
My pleasure. It's a weirdly compelling topic.
It really is. All right, until next time, keep questioning those familiar feelings.